A policeman who spent 7 years undercover in an environmental protest group.
Extraordinary, unorthodox infiltration
Full
methods.
extent of his clandestine infiltration.
Secret surveillance by the police.
New twist in one of the biggest police scandals of recent years.
She thought she was in a loving relationship with this man.
You see, Mark Kennedy walked, talked and acted like an environmental protester.
That day has been firmly cemented into my memory. I came home and switched on my laptop to check my emails. I opened one from a good friend that said simply, "Urgent. Have you already seen this?" I clicked on a link and saw a picture of my very good friend Mark smiling at me, under a headline that said, "Mark Stone Kennedy exposed as undercover police officer." I was stunned and felt my gut seize. We had been together across Europe, organizing large environmental and anti-globalization protests. Through our shared ideals and commitment, we bonded and became good friends. I wondered if it could be true that Mark was a spy. Thinking about it made me feel sick. I'd campaigned for years on protecting the ozone layer and stopping climate change, problems linked to rising problems with skin cancer, which I had recently developed. I felt angry learning that business and governments were even using spies to sabotage our efforts to find practical solutions to clearly understood problems.
Hello.
Hi honey, it's me.
Hey.
There was some news today.
What is it?
The doctor said there's more cancer than they thought, and they didn't cut it all out with the first operation. That was the plan, that it would all be gone after the first operation, but actually they have to cut out more today, and then I will stay the whole weekend, and they have to do something again on Monday. Okay, doctor's here. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
good
you.
luck.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Love you too. Bye.
Es geht los.
I had already been diagnosed with cancer, and finding out my friend Mark was a spy made my stress worse. As I was carried to the operating room, I asked myself, why me? Why was I being targeted? And who was responsible for these undercover operations? I tried every lead to find more background information, and after a lot of dead ends, finally got in touch with one of those who had been instrumental in finding out that Kennedy was an undercover cop.
I will have met Mark first in 2003. I don't remember him clearly there. He started having a relationship with a friend of mine, so I met him through that.
There was a bunch of us who were all kind of turning 40 that year, and it was actually Mark who spotted it and just said, you know, we're going to be 40, we should have some kind of big do.
That's it, we've been the motherfucking 69ers!
You know, we were all born in 1969, so we call it the 69ers party. Me and Mark did an awful lot of the organisation for that. We kind of instigated it. We thought we'd get different ones of the 69ers to sing different songs. I picked White Riot by The Clash. Mark did Folsom Prison Blues, which on the night he dedicated to the anarchist Black Cross. It's extraordinary the levels at which that's messed up, because I mean his job is all about putting people in jail, you know, and just this claim to solidarity is just so fucking twisted.
It's not like he's incredibly handsome, you know. It was more that he was so helpful, and he was always eager to make sure everybody was taken care of. Just his presence was really like nice to have along, because he always made everything easier, and he was paying for things that nobody else had money for. And I would say he definitely was seducing me, yeah. Because I remember being kind of taken aback, like, wow, this guy's paying a lot of attention, you know. I definitely had never had someone pay that kind of attention to me before. And then at some point, we agreed that I would come to Nottingham and I would stay at his house. And I knew that was going to be the beginning of our relationship. It was obvious that I was going there to sleep with him. I mean, it was like, we knew we liked each other that much. Going to Nottingham, spending a couple days there, meeting all his friends was the beginning of the relationship.
Kennedy made a film about his spying, and I had to see it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was meeting interesting people, doing interesting things. In that sense as well, I also liked the job I had. You know, I did a good job in as much as, you know, the taskings that were coming my way in relation to finding out about X, Y, or Z, I was achieving that as well.
I thought he had a very twisted view of reality.
So yeah, I liked the life that Mark Stone had, but I also enjoyed the job that Mark Kennedy had.
The late 1960s were groundbreaking for democratic social movements, and a wave of rebellion swept across the globe. In England, it was one particular protest in March 1968 at London's Grosvenor Square that formed a turning point for the authorities. The London Metropolitan Police had underestimated the massive, angry crowds at the anti-war protest, and police resorted to desperate use of violence in their attempts to regain control. The event shocked the country. When protesters started to organize a second rally for October 1968, Scotland Yard and the government were determined to clamp it down. This was the birth of the Special Demonstration Squad, or SDS, a new, highly secret police unit aimed at infiltrating political groups in order to watch and control their activities. Over the last 4 decades, the SDS refined its tactics and broadened its remit. Any group these unaccountable elite police didn't like was to be infiltrated and nipped in the bud. From its start in 1968 until today, the SDS's operations became less accountable and transparent, its tactics more and more questionable. Undercover officers were intruding on people's personal lives at every imaginable level. Eventually, through some contacts at The Guardian, I was introduced to a former undercover police officer who worked in Mark Kennedy's same branch.
When I was deployed undercover, I used predominantly the name Peter Black. I was given a different name that I actually haven't revealed anywhere at all. And the reason for that is I was given the identity of a dead child. I was an undercover police officer in predominantly anti-racist and anti-BNP or anti-Nazi activities, anti-fascist activities. So that was my bulk of my work that I did. So really, there was no anti-racist, anti-fascist demonstration in London from September 1993 to September 1997 that I can recall that I wasn't involved in. So every single time political activists went on the streets, I was there with them. Then within that role, people who were involved in those campaigns I reported back on. That was my main remit that I was employed. A normal day for an undercover police officer pretending to be an activist is I lived an activist life for how many days a week it was, and invariably I lived an activist life between 5 to 6 days a week, which meant I woke up in my undercover flat, I went to work doing undercover work, and whenever my activists did anything, I was with them. They thought I was a friend, but obviously I wasn't their friend. I was reporting back on them.
When you've gone through trauma with cops, it's like There's an anger in there that's savage. It's like sometimes when someone's asking me, how angry are you right now? I just feel like I want to like pull that tree out of the ground. People who don't have PTSD don't understand. They don't understand why all of a sudden you're getting really upset and then all of a sudden you're like going to take it out on someone. Little things will just upset me and my upset goes really big. And that's not who I am, but because I didn't deal with this at the time, it's like now I'm starting to deal with it, and it's how many years later? I mean, I ended my relationship with him in 2006. And it's not just at Mark, it's at the cops. It's like there's all this anger.
Merry Christmas. Have a great time away, dude. Enjoy Christmas, party hard into the new year, and let's do it all again in 2007. Big love, Mark.
It's a betrayal, but it's also bereavement that you've lost this person. But at least with bereavement, you had the time that was there and that was real. With this, none of it was real. We have the words that deal with bereavement and grief and stuff like that because that happens to everybody. This kind of thing happens to almost no one.
I was in the same position. I had felt that Kennedy was a very close friend, although I had been surprised by his suggestion once that we beat up neo-Nazis during one of his visits here in Berlin. Now I know he had made the proposal more as an agent provocateur who then reported everything directly back to his police bosses. I was having battles with myself and paranoia, as well as nightmares where I found out that close friends were actually undercover cops. I got a German lawyer who, after lots of difficulty, obtained a summarized file on me which started around the time I met Mark Kennedy. It was from the German political police, the Verfassungsschutz. Its content seemed surreal because nothing mentioned in the file was illegal. For example, saying I had attended a meeting in the parliament, that I had been a vice mayor in California, that I had written an article about state repression, that I had spoken out about Mark Kennedy in Germany's biggest news magazine Der Spiegel, and that I had made a public presentation about being spied upon. Every point in my file listed totally legal things, including that I had been at a registered demonstration opposing a well-known neo-Nazi murder. If Germany opposes fascism today, then why were its political police keeping a file on me for opposing Nazi murders? I joined a German campaign against political policing and played a supporting role at a demonstration at the parliament. I had trouble suspecting everyone could be an undercover cop, which felt surreal at an anti-spying demonstration. Nonetheless, I did my best to shake off the paranoia and continue the political work on issues that I felt passionately about. While in London, I also tried to speak to someone in charge at the London Metropolitan Police,
absolutely.
but my requests were denied.
Yes, I'm from Berlin. Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, I decided to meet the politicians responsible for overseeing the London Metropolitan Police. I met with Ginny Jones, the Deputy Chair of London's Police and Crime Commission.
I think the political motivation for the police is to, as they would think, keep the country safe. And I would like to say I think the police in Britain overall do an extremely good job, but on this issue, I think that they are out of control. And I'm absolutely sure that they are infiltrating groups that they really shouldn't be. All the time they don't have proper definitions of the people that they should be looking at, then of course they're going to overstep the mark. And when they drop into the lives of activists or targets, as they call them, and they sleep with them and even have children with them, that is actually not against the law here. And when I've challenged the Commissioner of the Met, he said, well, it shouldn't happen, but it's almost inevitable. And it's as if the police can't control themselves, as if they can't control their sexual urges, which I would argue is a nonsense, and they really ought to show a little bit more humanity.
London Mayor Boris Johnson had more authority over the Metropolitan Police, but he didn't seem to take the issue very seriously.
Jenny's asking about romantic entanglements between police officers and their targets, so to speak. There is plenty of fictional support for such an approach, but undercover officers should not target members of the public in that way.
I would like to point out there's no romance involved in this. There's absolutely no romance. It's use and abuse, and I would say assault.
Okay.
Ginny soon found out that she also was a target of police surveillance.
I'm paid £10 to get my file.
Yes.
And quite honestly, I want my money back.
Yes.
I was astonished to get my file. It is the most pathetic collection of tweets and little notices. And this is incredibly intrusive in people's lives on a level that is not of any value. You could be subject now to court cases over stuff you've gathered on people, which is again public money being spent on nonsense.
Jenny Jones had given me a good impression. She clearly was trying to get to the bottom of things, but was stuck fighting against a system that inherently protected itself against political interference. We needed someone with an even higher political rank to help. I heard the new leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, had been targeted himself by undercover police. I visited his constituency, where his election victory party was happening, and tried to get a statement from him on the subject.
Thank you very much.
And there you go.
Great. And where's the press conference?
Press conference is just upstairs. You'll see it. It's on the left.
Okay.
Loads of journalists. You won't miss it.
Okay, thank you.
The cameras just move over here so the journalists are over here. Okay, that didn't work.
We'll talk to everybody if you promise not to interrupt or interfere with each other's broadcasting questions. Is that all right?
That's fine, Mr. Corbyn.
My name's Jason Kirkpatrick. I'm a German filmmaker, and privacy and spying is a big topic, and you've been targeted by undercover spies. What would you do about spying and undercover spying?
Well, I understand that I have been observed by the security services for a number of years, and I raised this question in the House during the last Parliament as a breach of my privilege as a Member of Parliament, and I was told I could see the report and all the details in it, except the bits of the report that I couldn't see and the details I wouldn't be allowed to see. So I'm looking forward to receiving something at some point from the Home Office about what is or isn't in a report on me. But there's a serious point here that it's not just members of Parliament who shouldn't be put under surveillance. The public as a whole ought to be concerned about this sort of unaccountable behaviour. And so when I finally get that document, myself and other MPs, many of them, will be raising exactly the same points. They range from all sections of the Labour Party. It's Jack Straw, Peter Hain, myself, Diane Abbott, and the late Bernie Grant, who are under surveillance apparently.
Interesting that this man, who could become Britain's next Prime Minister, had also been treated like some terrorist by a police department that seemed totally out of control. If he ever ended up at 10 Downing Street, I wondered if Corbyn would come across the secret police files that Mark Kennedy claimed had reached Tony Blair's desk.
And so that we actually build a society where we all care for everybody else and everybody cares for each and every one of us. It's not complicated, it's basic human civilization and justice.
Despite the lack of resources, my friends and I continued our struggles as best we could, while trying to continue with our normal lives. We also pushed for an international inquiry into police spying. It really felt like David versus Goliath.
Take a look. Thank you very much. Maybe you've heard there's a lot of scandals about undercover police, like having girlfriends, campaigner girlfriends, you know, and leaving children. They've gone so far as to make special kind of anti-extremist, anti-terrorist laws that they just throw random environmentalists into. People have been threatened with life imprisonment that were friends of Mark Kennedy, and they don't know why. And they don't know how to get themselves off these extremist lists.
If they want to tap a phone call, they have to get the Home Secretary's signature on a warrant. And yet to send someone to be in your life, to be the closest person you've ever been to for years on end in your house, all they need is to decide to do it for themselves. No one outside the police decides to do this. It's just this runaway little secret police department. That went well.
There's a huge amount of resources. You know, I was officially sanctioned to resurrect somebody who died. The Home Office then provided me with a passport of a dead child that they knew that was dead within the system. So this is all state sanctioned. And so the state, as in creating and helping me to create Peter Black, was absolutely superb. The character was created. I pulled off the role. I was deployed for 4 years, and since becoming a police whistleblower, There's certainly been some feedback via the media that they were stunned that it was me who was a police officer. So there we are, A equals B. I must have been successful in what I did. The state supported me that. And when I was deployed, we were allowed to do anything to keep in role. So my role was a single person, and I was provided a flat to be a single person there. So if in the event your persona, it was necessary to engage in sexual activity for the purpose that you deemed to have purposes for cover, you were allowed to do that. You were also allowed to engage in longer term relationships if that's part of your cover as well. So yes, I was told specifically that sex was okay when I was out there. Use a condom because previously somebody had had a child. And the irony is the officer who told me that, Bob Lambert, he failed to actually mention to me, because he was my detective inspector, he was in charge of me when I was out there, he failed actually to mention to me that he actually had a child when he was out there. He talked about somebody else having a child but not himself. But that may imply that actually he wasn't the only SDS officer who had a child out there. There's give or take 110 SDS officers, and I'd be very, very surprised if there's only one SDS child out there.
I contacted Peter Francis's former boss, Bob Lambert, to ask for an interview, which he politely declined. So I went to meet his former partner.
It was the 14th of June, 2012. I came home from work as normal. So I made myself a pot of coffee and took the newspaper outside, and just like I did like lots of evenings, and just started flicking through the newspaper. And there was a picture of Bob back in the 80s. And I didn't even read the headline or anything. I just saw this picture and that was it. I went into shock. 1984. I met Bob. I'd been involved in animal rights for probably about 3 or 4 years by then. This was obviously during Margaret Thatcher was sort of Prime Minister at the time. Animal rights activism was quite big in this country. We were trying to get Hackney Council in London to adopt this animals charter. We were in the square outside the town hall. Bob made his way over to me. We had a little chat, and that was it. That was the first time I met him. One thing that did strike me about him is that he was older than most of us, because we were like late teens, early 20s. And as you probably find with the story with all of them, but as we know, kind of Bob was the trailblazer, the one who sort of started it all, is they all had an old van. You could get quite a lot of activists in the back of a van, and none of us had transport. He offered to lift home. I now know that this is the way they find out where people live. The person they're kind of targeting, the woman, would be the last one to be dropped off. And then you kind of be on your own with them at some point, and kind of things went from there. And as far as I was concerned, we were a couple. I had a child with him, and he didn't leave until our son was 2. And I've since found out that, in fact, he had a son and a daughter when my son was born. A 10-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Bob Lambert had been awarded an MBE, Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, for his services to the police. After he left the police, he had reinvented himself as an academic, lecturing on terrorism studies at multiple universities.
I think it's important that people know the truth about what happened, and I would like to ask the students at the university what they think about someone with this history being a professor.
Yeah, the whole thing is it's a policing centre. It's for people who are studying to become senior police officers, and this man's holding himself up as the role model, as the guy who's done it and will teach you how to do it. And yet this is a guy who's done everything wrong that you can do, who's damaged the citizens you're meant to protect, is colossal, who's left people feeling raped by the state. The man is not a role model. The man should not be having academic positions.
Can you give me a leaflet about one of the lecturers here, please? Thank you.
I'll give you a flyer about a professor here. Cheers.
I can give you that about one of the lecturers here and his dodgy past. Yeah, he was an undercover police officer that did loads of dodgy stuff, and now he's reinvented himself as an academic and he teaches here.
He's a very dubious and suspicious individual. I don't believe his sort of story.
Okay.
But it may be a good idea to invite you to a union branch.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, love to.
I don't even know whether he's a union member. I don't think he is. It'd be interesting to know.
Well, given his unit's history of blacklisting and working with private corporate spies as well, their union busting blacklisting kind of collusion, that would be a really interesting piece of hypocrisy if he joined a union.
It would be, yeah.
Our campaign continued, and Bob Lambert's teaching job came to an end. I felt excited that it appeared our work had made a difference. But Lambert's damage had already been done to labor organizers who had been put on construction company blacklists and denied work.
Hi mate, how you doing? Come on, let's go. Everyone's known about blacklisting in the building industry for decades, but the first time we got real evidence of it was in 2009. A government department did a raid on an organisation in the Midlands called the Consultant Association that no one had ever heard of before. It was a completely unknown body. And when they raided it, they found all these basically secret files that all big multinational building companies were keeping on trade union members. I went through all of the blacklist files, checking all of them, and it became absolutely obvious that there was some of the information on the files that could have only come from the police or the security services. And this is my file. It's 36 pages. It's got every job I worked on for 10 years, and it's got information about your trade union membership. My file's got my name, address, date of birth, national insurance number, my phone number, the car registration I drive. It's got information about my brother. It's got information about my wife, what my politics are, speeches I made at union conferences, leaflets I gave out about asbestos.
And you're spied on for that?
Well, I was not only spied on, I was sacked instantly. And it went from 1992 to 2009, and the very first bit on it says that I was involved in a protest about unpaid wages. So, this isn't burning down Parliament, this is complaining about overflowing toilets and asbestos.
And where did the police come into this?
Well, they used to have meetings. Directors of multinational companies, once every 3 months, used to sit around and discuss these secret blacklist files that they were keeping on people. And we know for a fact, because it's come out in Parliament, that the police used to attend the meetings. Undercover police officers from undercover police units used to attend these illegal blacklisting meetings to discuss about trade union activists. There's a group within Special Branch called the Industrial Section, and the entire purpose of the industrial section is to spy on trade unions and pass that information over to big business. And the government's not interested. They just see, because of the war on terror, you can't ever criticise anything the police do, you can't ever criticise anything the security services do, because they'll just throw this word of terrorism at us, as if I'm not a terrorist, I'm a trade unionist.
Special Demonstration Squad, as the name suggests, was primarily involved with demonstrations. Demonstrations quite often have trade unions supporting them. They quite often have finances for them, and they attend demonstrations with them. Within the Special Branch, there was an industrial section. And when I was deployed, basically any union member who came across in my path, I would happily report back on what they were involved in.
The police justification for using undercover spying for public security reasons seemed less and less connected to reality, while the binds between these spies and the interests of private companies was getting clearer. British energy companies had been demanding that the government crack down on climate change protesters, and Mark Kennedy was about to head into one of his most delicate undercover operations, one planned with those who had become his closest friends.
Mark and I were very kind of fraternal, and love was the word we ended up when we were using for how we felt about each other. It's a very strange thing, you're feeling all your organs moved around, somebody were the opposite of what you thought they were.
This is Ratcliffe-on-Soar coal-fired power station. We knew that to deal with the massive threat of climate change, we had to stop burning coal, and yet the government was planning a new generation of places like this. So the big fat ones you see are cooling towers putting out the steam that comes out from it, but the large one is the chimney. That's the smoke from burning coal. That's one of the largest point sources of carbon in the country. And people were going to shut down the plant, and then when the chimney was cool, get up there and climb up with enough provisions to stay there for a week, and then drop a banner that would have a rolling count of how many tonnes of carbon had been saved because this place wasn't in action anymore. We knew it wasn't risking anyone's energy supply to do this. It's in a national grid system, so that power stations can go off and on all the time. There's rising and falling demand all the time. They're used to this happening. So we knew that when that went off, a gas-fired power station somewhere else would come on instead, so that it would reduce carbon emissions, but it's not threatening anyone's energy supply. Police were saying that this threatens hospitals, this threatens vulnerable people. Threatens your granny, said a guy from the Association of Chief Police Officers who run the unit that Mark Kennedy was in. And they know it's in a grid system. They know as they say it, it's not true. They know they are trying to scare people. So it's all about keeping the coal burning because of the profit it brings to E.ON and the other companies like it who have these power stations. We don't know if E.ON pressured the police to do this, how close they were working. We do know from other cases that the corporations hire private detectives to come and do this, and it's an exchange of information two ways. And so we came together, there was 114 of us planning to come in and shut this down. And because it was 113 activists plus Mark Kennedy who was in the room, and we were raided by police preemptively, and all of us were arrested. It's the largest preemptive political arrest in English history as far as we know. What would have happened, how much further it would have got had it not had Mark Kennedy in there ruining it. We would have got further. And we're talking about people's livelihoods going down, we're talking about species going extinct. And there's going to be a measurable difference because of what those police officers did, for the worse.
The hole in the ozone layer and climate problems had helped cause my cancer, so I felt a strong personal motivation to solve environmental problems. Yet sometimes it felt hard enough just to survive my frequent operations.
So. Gibst du mir ein Sorgpapier, bitte?
Okay. Dann machen wir das Tuch jetzt wieder ab, ne? Zieht nochmal. Mal Salbe.
My good friend Kate had found new evidence that the spying started by her ex-boyfriend Mark Kennedy hadn't come to an end.
I'm one of 8 women who are bringing a case in the UK right now against the Metropolitan Police for assault and deceit and abuse of our human rights. Between 1998 and 2010, at least 6 people that I knew and worked with, and some of whom I considered friends, were actually undercover police officers. And this year, after a pretty weird control by the police in Valencia, we found this GPS tracker stuck under my car. And finding the GPS tracker was a bit of a wake-up call. They've basically been targeting me for the last 17 years. And that happened in part because I didn't believe that they would sink so low. I didn't believe that I was doing anything that would be interesting enough. And so I think that people need to know that this happens to real people, and the stuff that we're talking about is pretty horrible. And I don't want to send people out of here traumatized and scared and not wanting to take action. And I think it's important that people know that this stuff is happening, but I think it's also important to say that this stuff happened to us because we were doing something right. Yeah, like, don't stop, don't be scared by what we're saying, be aware, but yeah.
The first concrete suspicion, Mark's partner, I spoke to her on the phone, and she'd been on holiday with Mark in Italy. She'd found a passport in the name Mark Kennedy, because he wasn't a police officer anymore. Well, he's a police officer, he had a passport as Mark Stone. When he left the police, they took that off him. He came back as a corporate spy, still spying on us, doing the same work amongst the same people, still calling himself Mark Stone, but he didn't have the handlers and the support network, and he didn't have the fake ID anymore. You know, it felt unlikely. It felt unlikely that he would be a police officer. You know, we thought, like, he's been a mate for 7 years. Like, you know, they don't leave them in the field for 7 years. He lives with us. You know, he's not away that often. And it's only looking back, actually, you figured that he was away a lot because he was in touch so much. You know, he'd be always texting, calling, Facebook and whatever. He actually felt present even when he was absent a lot. Mark was a very sociable and gregarious man and a big traveller, so he should have had enormous amounts of Facebook friends. He had 90. The weird thing was I knew them as well, and that's the weird thing, because you can have, you know, you ask the closest people to you, go and look at their Facebook, it's full of people you've never heard of. It's a strange thing about it. Everybody's network is different to everyone else's, and so that one was suspicious. That was when we thought, this actually does look like somebody's fake life. We found the address where he lives with his wife in Ireland, found a phone number for that, rang up, and he answered. And we wanted him to explain. He said, "What do you think you know?" And we said, "We're not talking about it on the phone." He rang back a couple of hours later and said he was coming over. He said, I land at 1, so I'll be with you about 2. We checked, there was no flight from any Irish airport to any UK airport that landed at anything like that time. That means he must have arrived earlier and talked to somebody else before coming to see us. We knew that he'd been a police officer. We knew he'd been a police officer until very recently, that he had spent years fucking us over. We knew that this was almost certainly the last time we were ever going to see him. We knew that he was still lying. He had lied and lied and lied. And then when we said, "We know you just lied, tell the truth this time," because that wasn't true, and he just lied and lied again. It was insulting, you know, what he was trying to get us to believe. And so one of the others just interjected and just said, "And when did you join the police?" Now, Mark was sat here and he looked at the ceiling and did this big exhalation and just went, "You can't ask these questions." Which was a huge moment of relief. That's a confession. We weren't accusing an activist comrade. That guy was a cop.
There's been a lot said about me acting as an agent provocateur. Like, that's not true. There's many people out there who probably didn't get involved in things as a result of me saying, "Look, is it worth doing this? Are we gonna, you know, we could all get arrested." You know, in some ways I saw my role as a deterrent as much as anything.
I couldn't believe Kennedy was denying that he'd been an agent provocateur. I had heard from other activists that he had been the first to propose violent actions, and that was my experience too. One time Mark Kennedy visited me in Berlin, and we went for a long night out drinking at local bars in my neighborhood. When we walked back to my flat together, he asked me if I wanted to go with him and his English crew to physically attack neo-Nazis in Germany. I was surprised about his proposal to use violence, since we had never discussed any such thing before, and his proposal sounded absurd. I thought I might have heard wrong, so I asked him what he had in mind. He repeated his offer to bring friends from England and go with me to attack neo-Nazis in Germany, asking me if I knew of any who needed to be sorted out. I told him I didn't and refused to participate. Now that I know Kennedy's job had been to target me, I wonder who ordered him to act like an agent provocateur, suggesting I join him in a violent criminal act against neo-Nazis, which surely would have landed me in jail. I wondered, who had put Kennedy up to this? Was it a German secret police decision to target anti-racists? Or a British police decision? And why me?
Thank you for calling the Press Bureau at News Scotland Yard. Your call is being held in the queue and we'll answer it as soon as possible. All our press releases are published online at news.met.police.uk.
Good afternoon, Press Bureau.
Hello, good day. My name is Jason Kirkpatrick, and I would like to interview someone there about the undercover policing issues, especially as related to the cases of Mark Kennedy and other undercover police.
If it's an ongoing court case or a civil case, then we don't generally give interviews or
talk about the matters that arise from those proceedings.
Right, there's also beginning now a 3-year public inquiry led by Judge Pitchford that has been announced by...
Yeah, that's right, we do. There is a public inquiry coming ahead.
Does that mean you won't be speaking on that issue for at least the 3 years that it takes for the inquiry to resolve?
I think all that we can do is on a basis.
Many of us have been insisting that the current situation with the police investigating themselves was merely a damage limitation exercise. After 4 years of our hard campaigning, the UK Home Affairs Secretary finally relented and agreed to open up an independent inquiry. However, she limited the inquiry to only include England and Wales, although the undercover operations covered over a dozen countries, including my chosen home country, Germany. It still wasn't clear to me if Kennedy's spying here was technically legal, according to German law. So I went to see a very well-known German lawyer and member of parliament.
Ich bin im deutschen Parlament Mitglied des parlamentarischen Kontrollgremiums für die Geheimdienste. Ich nehme mal an, dass das eine neue Art der Zusammenarbeit der Sicherheitsdienste in Europa ist. Also ich hatte gleich von Anfang an, als ich davon gehört habe, die Vermutung oder Befürchtung, dass das ein gezielter Einsatz durch Sicherheitsbehörden ist, dass die deutschen Sicherheitsbehörden sich so jemand ausleihen, möglicherweise, oder auch, dass die britischen Sicherheitsbehörden damit Informationen in Deutschland abschöpfen wollen oder auch beides zusammen. Deshalb habe ich mich auch sehr stark dafür eingesetzt, dass die Tätigkeiten von Herrn Kennedy in Deutschland, die er hier auch in Deutschland über Jahre offenbar praktiziert hat, und auch die Vertrauensverhältnisse, die er sich erschlichen hat, dass die aufgeklärt werden und dass möglichst jetzt anlässlich der Untersuchungen, die in London laufen, das mit einbezogen wird, dass sich diese Untersuchungen nicht nur konzentrieren auf das, was er im Vereinigten Königreich gemacht hat, sondern auch das, was er in Europa gemacht hat, was er in Deutschland gemacht hat. Und zwar von Anfang an. Also wie kam es überhaupt, dass der in Deutschland eingesetzt wurde? Und was hat er hier gemacht? Und wem hat er berichtet? Und wer hat ihn bezahlt? Wie viel wurde bezahlt? Also das ist ja auch alles ein ganz wichtiges Feld, was, denke ich, auch aufgeklärt werden muss. Und wir hier in Deutschland haben da große Probleme, diese Aufklärung zu leisten, weil er ja nicht hier ist und die Fäden eigentlich alle in England zusammenlaufen.
I was the first SDS officer to go to Europe with regards to my work. I was the local branch secretary for an organisation called Youth Against Racism in Europe. As the name suggests, it's a European organisation, and shortly after I was deployed in the summer of 1994, they had a big conference in Bavaria. My pretend history was that I was a fluent German speaker because in my real life, my actual real mother is German. So I wove it in. This is what we do with our legend, with our method acting ways. I wove it in, and the activists knew this. It was in Bavaria, so it made sense for me to go. I had absolutely zero schooling in any law whatsoever. As far as I was concerned, I knew there was a liaison taking place, that the German police, as in the security side of the police, were aware that I was over there, that was established, but I was never briefed that, say, for example, if I was in Germany, I couldn't do this, for example, engage in sexual relationships or something else. I wasn't schooled at all. All it was is I spent a whole week undercover in Bavaria with my activists, and when I got back to the UK, I'd done an in-depth report about the entire YRE camp, the composition of the YRE in Europe, how active they were across Europe. I pretty much broke down the entire leadership of the European section of the Youth Against Racism for the police in England, which was also duly handed to the German counterparts as well.
How long is this case going to take?
Well, I mean, everyone's just kind of hypothesizing that it could be 7 years. I mean, nobody knows. Could be 1 year, it could be 3 months, but I mean, it could be a really long haul. They're just going to try to delay and delay and delay until pretty much the case is thrown out and we just get a payoff, pretty much, which is not what we're after. Like, that's not the point. We want it to be different for women. We don't want women activists to have to go through this. I mean, I don't look forward to that, but I also don't plan on stopping my life.
I'm just feeling really angry right now. I mean, for me, like, the first thing that I felt when I found out was like, shit, he was my friend.
Yeah.
You know, like, shit, I've just lost a really close friend.
Yeah.
And it's like that person didn't ever exist.
I don't know, I don't take it there. I feel like he did exist because there is some part of him that I connected with. So I don't think of it as he didn't exist. I mean, the person I know existed. And just, he wasn't who I thought he was, but he's still real and he's probably really fucked up.
I fucking hope so. I hope he's more fucked up by this than any of us.
Well, I don't know if I hope that, because I don't know, I just don't hope that on anyone really, but I understand the anger.
Where are you at? Where have you got to with your case?
We've submitted a claim and we were asking the cops to comply to things and they weren't. I had my psych report done.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, which part of my life have I had for me?
Yeah.
Which part of my life was actually intimately mine? Because, I mean, that's what it boils down to. You're like, I have no intimacy anymore.
Wir haben Gesetze, da ist das ganz genau geregelt. Was da völlig fehlt, ist eine Vorschrift, dass man ein solches intimes Vertrauensverhältnis nicht erschleichen darf. Ich glaube, die Fälle, die jetzt bekannt geworden sind, das ist nicht nur der Fall Kennedy, sondern wir haben ähnliche Fälle in Hamburg, jetzt relativ aktuell, wo großer Schaden angerichtet worden ist. Die sind eigentlich Anlass dafür, zu sagen, das muss V-Leuten auch verboten werden. Also das mag bei 007 im Kino ganz lustig sein, wenn man das alles anguckt, aber das darf in einer freiheitlichen Demokratie nicht passieren, vor allen Dingen, wenn man die Menschenrechte achten will und das Grundrecht auf freie Entfaltung der Persönlichkeit für Männer und für Frauen natürlich auch.
Some aspects of the British spies reminded me of the Stasi, but I wondered if my comparison was too extreme. Kate came to visit me in Berlin, and we decided to go to the Stasi Museum.
We are at number 1.
Yes,
here.
came in there.
It's a big complex.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that the whole city block, I think it started like this and then it got bigger and bigger also. So, what's the first thing to see?
There's a part of the exhibition which looks at the perpetrators, and that's like the people who were actually working, and that's where I think we can get some idea of what a back room looks like for a spying operation. I wanted to have a look at the Stasi Museum because I wanted to understand a little bit about what had happened and also to really see where the similarities were, and to find out that actually the police in Britain and all over Europe has been spying on political movements for all of this time. This is really amazing. This People's Committee that went on hunger strike until they were given the access to their files.
Yeah, and in the exhibition they say a few places like the reason they ended up storming the place is because they've been asking for their files and they never got them.
Yeah. Maybe you don't have to rely on the legal system and the public inquiries. I don't trust these processes. We've been doing this court case for 4 years and we still haven't been given anything. We've put in our data protection requests and we've got nothing in return. The lesson that I took away from the Stasi Museum is that the reason why people got their files was because people took action. It wasn't because there was some process by the state or investigation or judicial process. It was because people went and occupied the building and said, enough is enough, we're taking our files back. I know that so much about what happened in my story is going to be covered up. I think about the paper shredders that have been running day and night ever since Mark got found out, and the documents that have disappeared either by human error or by design. And I would very much like to see the kind of vilification that has been applied to the Stasi since the fall of the Berlin Wall, applied to the Special Demonstration Squad and all of these political spying units. Maybe one day we can go to a museum about the Metropolitan Police spies and find out just how bad it really was.
I've been an environmental activist for much of my adult life, which has inevitably brought me into contact with the police. When you get arrested and questioned by police, they caution you and you can have a lawyer there with you. Yet we'd had police talking to us for years and we didn't even know they were police. You know, they're not just searching our houses, they're living in them. Not just listening to your thoughts, but helping you shape them. You know, after years with Mark and other officers with us, we have to wonder how much of our thinking has actually been steered by them. They don't just infiltrate activist campaigns, they live with you. They integrate into your family. They're there at birthdays and weddings and funerals. Some of them don't stop at joining an existing family. These are not counter-terrorism officers. These are counter-democratic police. The units specifically target people who are a threat to the established political order. This can be peace campaigners even. This can be elected politicians. One of the officers said if we'd been around at the time of the suffragettes, their campaigns wouldn't have got off the ground and they would have been quickly forgotten. This breaches our fundamental human rights. This breaches our right to a private and family life. This breaches our right to political assembly, our right to freedom from inhumane and degrading treatment. The British government has been forced to announce a full public inquiry into its political secret police. And the hearings are likely to bring forth a lot more details. A load of people are going to find out that their past wasn't real. Everyone has a right to be a part of the struggle for environmental and social justice without fear of persecution, objectification, or interference in their lives.
I think it's a police-state thing. They wish to know what society is doing. There was a multitude of demonstrations that I was on. I witnessed and was subjected to a lot of police brutality myself. And really, by the time you get to sort of 2-3 years into this, you start to realise that the police, when they're on demonstrations, have got a specific instruction, and that is to facilitate public demonstrations. That's what they're there for in demonstrations. And what any activist, and by which time I'd spent 3 years pretending to be an activist, were realising that's not quite what the police do. There's one specific example. I was outside Kennington Police Station and some officers from Kennington Police Station that been involved in an arrest that resulted in the death of Brian Douglas, who was involved in a struggle with the police.
What do you want? Justice! What do you want it? Now! What do you want? Justice! What do you want it? Now!
The family, with me present there and other demonstrators, were outside the police station calling for regress that this was dealt with, properly investigated. And I felt at the time that me being on that actual event was wrong. I actually felt that the family were fully justified in being outside the police station, calling, that they wanted this to be investigated properly. And I felt very, very uncomfortable by me being an undercover police officer actually on these demonstrations against very, very debatable use of police violence.
No justice! No justice!
The police at Kennington wanted intelligence about what the format of these demonstrations are going to be. Me in my capacity as being in the movement for justice and the youth against racism in Europe, I provided intelligence. I said how many people would be on the demonstrations. I managed to say what the feeling on the demonstration was and the likelihood of violence. And this is what I forecasted forward. That's what our job was. And I think the thing that struck me the most with the demonstration is how restrained the family were.
You kill my child! None of you have mother, you don't have mother and children and wife and family! You don't have any, you wicked murderer! You kill him like a dog! You dogs! Oh God Almighty!
The mother of Brian Douglas, she actually called for the demonstrators to make sure they were calm and stayed calm and all this stuff. And me, myself, I was trying to equate then what I would personally have felt like if somebody just killed my son. And I can guarantee you, absolutely guarantee you, I wouldn't have been restrained as that family was.
A black man's life is worth shit in this country, and it always has been and it always will be. And we have to stop it.
I was again asked, well, what can we do? And I had a very brief answer. I'm not sure it actually went back exactly the way I gave it the SDS, is I just said, well, basically stop killing black people. It's been described in the media that the unit felt that we may have lost our moral compass. And I felt that is probably a bit more severe than that. I believe we didn't have a moral compass.
The Metropolitan Police Service has recently settled 7 claims arising out of the totally unacceptable behaviour of a number of undercover police officers working for the now disbanded Special Demonstration Squad, an undercover unit within Special Branch that existed until 2008, and for the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, an undercover unit which was operational until 2011. Thanks in large part to the courage and tenacity of these women in bringing these matters to light, it has become apparent that some officers, acting undercover while seeking to infiltrate protest groups, entered into long-term intimate sexual relationships with women, which were abusive, deceitful, manipulative and wrong. I acknowledge that these relationships were a violation of the women's human rights, an abuse of police power, and caused significant trauma. I unreservedly apologise on behalf of the Metropolitan Police Service. The Metropolitan Police recognises that this should never happen again, and the necessary steps must be taken to ensure that it does not. It is hoped that the claimants will now feel able to move on with their lives. The Metropolitan Police believe that they can now do so with their heads held high. The women have conducted themselves throughout this process with integrity and absolute dignity.
The personal implications of that for me, for my life's projects, for my sense of who I am and what I can believe have been really devastated. And one of the big issues is that I and all of the women here remain haunted by the unanswered questions. I recently made a Data Protection Act application for my police files, and the response that I got doesn't mention Mark, and it doesn't mention any of the 5 other police spies that have been uncovered that I have known over the course of my political campaigning. It doesn't mention the GPS tracking device that I found under my car in March of this year. And so I'm left asking, was I targeted for my political beliefs and they're lying to cover it up? Or am I just what they call collateral intrusion in a massive secret operation against political dissent that actually sidelines my life, my family, my body, myself, and doesn't even consider it worthy of mentioning in an operational authorization? And the political implications of either of those possibilities for how the police in this country are behaving and how we are being subjected to political policing are very, very serious. My court case is going to continue. And I hope that through that process and through the public inquiry and the really amazing work that is being done by activists and by whistleblowers, that we will eventually get answers.
We're here because we want to come out and say that we are strong and sexy against climate change. We can grow our own tomatoes.
As soon as I started that process of reaching out, I just wasn't a victim anymore. It was like I wasn't alone in it, and the more I'm speaking about it, the stronger I feel. Just the action in itself feels like a triumph. Even if it doesn't get laws changed, the work we did together behind the scenes is really empowering, and it lays a groundwork for social movements. You know, I mean, that's what I've been working on. That's why I was spied on, because I've been involved in social movements. So it's like, they can't take that away. I'm never going to give that up. So, you know, part of not feeling like a victim is not letting them win.
I don't miss him at all. There isn't a him to miss. You know, that was someone there who was just manipulating and abusing, who was actually on the other side. You know, while I was with him, I was doing climate change activism. I was doing anti-fascist work, and he was there to undermine it. You know, this is a seriously committed and effective pro-capitalist, pro-climate change, pro-fascist activist. You know, fuck him.
Since this undercover scandal broke, I often felt angry and frustrated as police and those at the top repeatedly attempted to cover up the truth about what they had done to escape any form of being held accountable. It was sickening that even in the public inquiry, we had to continue battling police, lawyers, and bosses. But I also felt like my friends and I had become a tight team that campaigned well together, and that if we kept the pressure on, we could force more of their dark secrets into the light of day. I learned that if people are actually going to have a say over how and for who their society works, or have a kind of democracy where people have a real say in decisions that affect their daily lives, average people are going to have to take charge and create it for themselves.